Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
And it's the Maryland Crabs.
It is.
Look at that. I sound like Peter Brady. My voice just cracked. And it's time,
it's time to change.
This week, we've got an incredible guest. It's a real powerful episode.
Pork chops and apple sauce.
This week's episode is very powerful. And what we did is we hunted down the stereotypical girl next door, if you will. Jenn is 20 years old.
I literally went next door, and there she was.
She's 20 years old, a rising senior at University of Maryland, and she was addicted to drugs at age 13, and she has been clean and sober for about 3 years now.
So 13 to 17. She was
and went down a really, really tough path.
And it could have ended up pretty... And I think I was saying before we started that this one was really kind of hit me because it reminded me so much of my daughter, who's only a little bit younger than Jenn was. And Jenn had an upbringing that was very similar to what my daughter has, whether, the same kind of neighborhood, same kind of upbringing, two parents, all those things. And yet she so easily slipped into the drug culture and drug abuse. And she's not what you would think when you look at her. And I think that's the point of the work that not my child does, that she volunteers for. It
is. And if you think it's not happening in your neighborhood, you're dead wrong. And there's one point in here where Jenn says that her mom realized she had to be willing to accept the fact that she might die.
Do you know, and actually, I just got off the phone with someone with whom I work. She's a freelancer, and I don't think she'd mind me saying this, but she was talking about her daughter who's got some serious problems right now and has relapsed pretty badly. And she said, and again, I don't think she'd mind me saying this, she goes, it sounds horrible to say. She said, but sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't be better if she had died, or if she died. She goes, for her kids, for everyone around her. She goes, I feel horrible saying that, but it's something that I just can't get away from. And I think maybe that's not that abnormal of a reaction. It's not, you don't wish them that way, but it's just after a while, it's you're thinking you hate to see that suffering go on with someone you care for so much.
I don't know what a normal reaction would be. And, knocking on wood, I've not had to deal with that. But Jenn is somebody that you wouldn't expect. I mean, She's not sleeping, cracked out on the floor of some public bathroom. She is from a very upscale neighborhood, divorced family, whose both parents were able to live in that same upscale neighborhood, participated in beauty pageants, honor roll or IB program at Annapolis High School, and definitely not what you think. So if you don't think it's happening with you are, it definitely is. We're going to put a copy of the video, the Not My Child video, which the county produced, onto our website, which is themarylandcrabs.com. So if you're getting this on your phone, streamed somehow, go to the website and check out this video, because it is something that you probably should take a look if you've got a young child to a young adult.
And we'll cross-post that on our Facebook page and our group that's on the Maryland Crabs on Facebook. So we have a group and a page, so you want to go join those if you have not done that yet. You can also find us on Twitter. John's at I in Annapolis. I'm at Tim Hamilton 47, and collectively we're at MD Crabs Podcast, so go ahead and follow us on Twitter. You can also send us an email at info@themarylandcrabs.com, and our webpage is themarylandcrabs.com, and of course subscribe to us on Google Play and Apple Podcasts, and you can listen to episodes that we've done before. And we've done 2 or 3 episodes that have to do with this subject, and the reason being is that we're kind of at ground central when it comes to Maryland, to this issue. So there's times where I think, I don't want to beat a dead horse, so to speak, but at the other time, this really, it's a crisis in the most figurative and most literal of ways.
It is. It's time to beat the dead horse.
So anyway, after this break, we're going to come back with Jenn and take a listen.
Hi, this is Arundel County Executive Steve Shue. We're battling a heroin epidemic that we can't fight alone. Talk to your kids about the danger of drugs today. The road to heroin abuse often starts with a prescription from a doctor. Don't be silent about this problem. Talk to your children. Ask your doctor to provide only the minimum number of pills necessary. Go to denialisdeadly.org right now for the tools you need to stop heroin addiction before it starts.
Good morning, Jenn. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. I haven't seen you since when I was working at R&R and the days before I got fired from there.
It's been a while.
It's
been a while.
So, last week we talked with Jared Libman, and we got all wonkish with policy and city politics and everything else. And we're going to change our stride a little bit again. And
or we could talk to Jenn about city politics and
all I know.
So we'll get into the finances.
As a 20-year-old.
It'll be a different conversation. No, we're going to change our stride a little bit, and we've talked a couple times about the opioid and the heroin problems that we're facing here, and addiction and everything else in the county. What the county has been doing, what the state has been doing to offer help. Jenn, welcome, and throw it out there. I mean, you are a recovering addict, right?
Right. So I'm 20 years old. I'll have 3 years clean this coming September. I got clean when I was 17 and right out of high school.
So you've been clean since you were 17?
Yeah.
How long? Right out of high school. Okay, so how long?
Let me paint the picture here, Rick, too. So we're looking at Jenn, just so you know. So Jenn's got kind of a Mother of Dragons vibe going right now. Just kind of blonde, glad, very pretty in a non-creepy way. But so my point is that there's some people that I've seen that have gotten into heroin and drugs, and they come out the other side looking a little bit rough. So
yeah.
The point that the reason we wanted to have Jenn come in is because Jenn had kind of fairly typical Annapolis, outer suburb, kind of middle class sort of upbringing.
Very normal.
So the point of this is just whenever someone meets someone like you, they would never, ever go to addiction. They would never go because seemingly you have everything. And
right.
You have everything. So you're going, you have the looks, you have the background, you have the family, you live in Annapolis. Yep. How rough could your life be? And that's kind of why we wanted to have you in here.
And this is really sort of the answer to that whole, it's not happening in my neighborhood. And I mean, and you came in, I don't want to make it sound like you came from this world of privilege. I mean,
she wore a crown.
I did though.
Well, in realistically in terms you did. But I mean, you're not Kevin Plank's kid or something like that. So,
no.
But it's, I mean, you lived in a very upscale neighborhood.
Right.
Excelled in school. You were a competitor. Is that the word for in a well-known beauty pageant?
It was
type,
beauty pageant organization. Like I did all that. I was the straight A student. Really typical. But it all comes down to feelings. And I think people, they want to understand addiction from all the articles they read and the people they hear about, the friends of friends they hear about. But it's really hard to understand unless you talk to a real recovering addict, and see what's up with them, because to me it all comes down to the feelings I had growing up, the feelings of like not belonging and feeling unlovable, because I think it might seem on the outside like everything's perfect, quote unquote, but then you go back to your childhood. For a lot of people it starts in their childhood, and they have a lot of pain they're carrying around. So like I had a really rough relationship with my father growing up, so there was a lot of discipline in the household that was early on started the feelings of like, I'm not good enough. Like I don't feel good with myself. And I didn't get a lot of attention from him. I didn't get a lot of attention from my parents. They were busy people. I lived in the upscale neighborhood, but it also meant that I didn't get time with my parents because they were working all the time.
They were working. They wanted to maintain that lifestyle and everything else for you.
Right. And so I think that is really common with people from upscale neighborhoods or really nice lives. It's something in their childhood. Maybe they suffered from abuse. Maybe they suffered from not neglectful parents, but parents who weren't there.
What's kind of interesting, though, is you'd mentioned that, and I've heard this, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but Severna Park is ranked within the nation as far as one of the top communities, and that's not a good ranking to have for suicide,
right.
For teen suicide. And a lot of that is really sort of
a lot of pressure.
Pushed about pressure. Okay,
yeah.
No, we need to, you need to be a lax bro. We need to, you're not on the honor roll. What's this, and no, we don't apply to University of Maryland. What the hell are you thinking of? Harvard's in Boston, I mean, it's, and that's the type of mentality that you see at some of these things, which is kind of crazy. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I do. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and so far they haven't turned out to be drug addicts like me, and I don't have any addiction in my immediate family, but it runs in the family. It's the grandparents. It's the aunts and uncles I've never met, that kind of thing.
Alcohol?
Yeah, it's alcohol, mental illness, depression, things like that.
I mean, my father is an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And he's, he's always told me all my life, be very, very careful.
Right. It's funny to hear that, though, because my parents said the same thing. They were like, well, my mom would share, like, my father's an alcoholic. You have to drink in moderation if you want to drink and all that. But it never applied to me. Because from the very early on, I didn't understand the whole drinking and using of drugs yet. I was just a kid. But like, I just felt like moderation never applied to me. Like, when I first started using, I wanted to use all the time to fill that hole, like, and to make myself feel happy again. Because I never really ever been happy my whole life.
Well, when did it start?
So I drank my first drink that got me drunk at 14. You know, I smoked weed first time that got me high when I was 14.
Who's they?
What?
You said they.
Oh, sorry, I don't remember what I said. No, sorry. Well, I think going back to that, like like my parents, they tried to explain to me that like it's in moderation. You know, my parents were the ones who were trying to
Oh, no,
build...
I meant you said they got me high. Was it the crowd that you were hanging with? At the time?
Yeah. This is the crowd I was getting high with. So I always sought out the people using drugs too. Like people I work with in the Not My Child, for the Not My Child panel, you know, they'll have these things to say like, oh, you know, here's all the ways when you go to parties not to drink and not to get high. But I'm like, no, I went to parties to drink and get high. Like, this does not apply to me. Like, I don't understand what you're trying to say.
So at 14, are you in middle school or is that high school?
That's high school for me.
Okay, so...
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you think about it, I used for 3 years and it was so bad in those 3 years that I had to get clean when I was 17. Like, it was that miserable.
I knew a few people. I knew one guy who got sober at 18. And I'm just like, come on, how bad could it be? He's just, dude, it was bad.
It was really, really bad. Because it might not necessarily be like the physical manifestation of addiction that gets you down. It's the emotional and spiritual. Like, I died a spiritual death. Like, I wanted to kill myself every day. And like, I couldn't get out of that. And I didn't know why. But I also knew that I used drugs to feel better, but eventually they didn't anymore, but I couldn't stop.
Is that when you said I wanted to kill myself every day? Is that a legitimate desire to do? I mean,
yeah.
I've got daughters that are slightly younger and slightly older than you.
Yeah.
Or maybe my youngest is right about your age. And I mean, she gets upset at something like that.
Right.
Says, "Oh, I'm just going to kill myself."
Yeah.
You know, I failed my whatever. I'm going to just go kill myself. And you just know that. But I mean, that was a legitimate thing. Did you ever try suicide?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it as an addiction, a slow suicide, you're putting all these drugs that could potentially kill you in your body and not care about the consequences. But at the same time, it got so bad that was all I was thinking about. And I just knew at that point, like, I was actually going to do it by overdosing on drugs, or I could get clean. Like, there were no other alternatives for me. Because I had the psychiatric hold for threatening to kill myself. Like, I had done that thing. I had, you know, been put in handcuffs before. Like, I never got into the jails and institutions, truly. Like, I was never committed. I never spent a long time in jail. But, like, it was enough, you know, that wasn't what killed me really spiritually. It was degrading myself every day to use drugs and having no way out, basically.
Let's go back a little bit. So you're 13, 14, and
right.
that for especially for a girl, that's a very delicate part in your life,
yeah.
because that's where you formulate your relationship with other people, and
right.
especially men. You know, you determine how you're going to be treated. And you know, I have a daughter who's a few years younger than you are, and I take it very seriously, the fact that I know that my relationship with her is going to really determine her relationship with men moving forward.
Yeah.
And I take it very seriously. But I always swore that I would never do the things that my parents did,
right.
and you do. It's
it just happens.
It just water finds its own level, and it's really hard at that point to determine, you know, what makes you a good parent, what doesn't.
Right.
But in your case, so you felt there was something missing at any rate, whether it be you mix typical teenage angst in with things that probably aren't typical, and it's all individual. So whatever it was for you, there was something missing. It wasn't, you didn't cognitively think at the time going, there's something missing. What can I fill it with? It was just that you gravitated towards something, right?
Well, there was a little bit of that. I know where you're coming from. So there was never, I don't know if I would call it missing. I feel like there was just like a empty hole in my heart. Like I needed to fill it with something. Like I was just missing something. I was always longing for something. I never understood what it was, and I always just thought I was insane. I always thought I was just crazy. I think I was just longing for fulfillment and a peace of mind that I never had. And like a lot of people take it for granted, a peace of mind, but I never had peace of mind. I always felt like I needed something to fill like the hole inside my heart. Like I never felt whole my whole life. And I only started feeling whole once I got clean and it was part of a 12-step fellowship. And I think people have a hard time understanding addiction if they're not going through it. Because it's like, what happens? Like, why does my kid turn out an addict, right? And so I think there might be a genetic predisposition. Like I had it in my family. It might be from how I was raised, you know, nature versus nurture. It might have been continuing through my life, you know, through other kids bullying me or just, you know, feeling not part of growing up. But like what it really comes down to is like, it's a disease of the feelings. And like I said, I kind of built up for you how I started to feel my whole life. And when I got the chance to use in high school, I grabbed onto it because it was the only thing in my whole life that had ever made me feel happy and whole.
So it started probably with just drinking like
Mike's Hard Lemonade.
And...
It was that innocent. It was just like a few Mike's Hard Lemonade, you know, maybe one blunt here and there. It was so normal.
I can remember the first. Well, I grew up taking sips of beer. It was not taboo in my family. Irish Americans.
Right.
So
Same.
But I remember the first time I like drank. It was in Sean O'Hara's basement. And
like everybody's. That's how I did it.
I remember it was like an after school
basement
special.
down the street here.
And then it was. I remember the first cigarette I had, and both my grandmothers had died from lung cancer 2 years earlier. Mm-hmm. So at the point, I was really. I remember that's how powerful it was that they had the cigarette, and I'm like, no, I don't smoke. And then 10 minutes later, I'm smoking. But that was all probably 13 at the same time.
It starts. Well, like, why is it that I'm a drug addict and people who are my age now and drank with me then, like, why aren't they, right? And
I'm an ex-smoker, and if I had a cigarette right now, I would be back at 0 or 100 because I am an addictive person too. So everything for me is if something's good, then a lot of it is really, really good.
Yeah.
So that's how I am with smoking, with anything else, and it is a person. My wife can have an occasional cigarette, and I just can't.
Yeah,
there's no way.
You know, it's funny. I never got addicted to cigarettes the whole time I was using, and I can even now smoke one cigarette, and I'm fine. But if you put drugs in front of me, like you will never see me again.
All right, so we're at booze and weed at this point. All right, so at what point does it start to shift?
It starts to shift.
So because where we are right now is relatively normal.
It's normal, yeah. What's going on?
So
even then, like I feel like people my age used to just feel happy and carefree, and it wasn't, and they were fine when they
You're
stopped
not thinking about it too much.
Getting high, yeah, and nobody really was, but like it made me feel so good. I wanted it all the time, and if I wasn't, I was miserable and I wanted to die, like you were talking about, and that like I genuinely was suicidal like my whole life. Like I always had suicidal ideations, from like 10 years old to when I got clean. And the only time I wasn't suicidal was when I was high. So I try to stay high as much as possible.
And you said suicidal since you were 10 or so. And you had mentioned earlier that you had, I just wrote a quick note here, but that you're just with feelings of not being loved or whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's just something that was through your childhood just because of the way the family was structured. I mean, you got a dual income household where both parents are working and trying to give everybody the best life that they possibly can. Right.
A highly stressful household, highly disciplined. You know, there was not a lot of room for mistakes, in my household. So, like I said, it was just all that stress all the time.
So going into middle school, then you had that pressure and you had that thought of self-harming yourself. And then in high school, you discovered the way to relieve that.
Yes, that's what it is. It's always just a relief. Like a lot of people, even people who don't have drug addictions or alcoholism, when you take a drink, you just feel a little better and you feel a little lighter.
If you had not started drinking or smoking at 14 in high school and there wasn't that pressure relief valve, I'm thinking of a pressure cooker, would you have killed yourself? It's
interesting to ask that question because I think I would have been miserable for longer, but there is that basic instinct of survival in humans. Like I think I would have pushed through. But I would have found something eventually to ease my pain. I was always searching for it. Like I was talking about, I was always searching for something. If it hadn't have been drugs and alcohol then, maybe it would have been a few years later. Maybe it would have been shopping. Maybe it would have been men in relationships. You know, I just needed something to fill the hole because I wanted to live, but I also like couldn't stand living.
Yeah, I mean, you hear all sorts of things. People go into cutting. They go into...
and I know so many people that cut and burn themselves,
And, or it could, like you said, shopping. I mean, I've heard people that do shoplifting.
Yeah.
To do things like that.
Well, it's because it's a thrill. It's an adrenaline rush. And I think when it comes to suicide, that's an interesting thing. Is because a lot of it could be, a lot of it can be pressure. A lot of it can be your life circumstances, but a lot of it's chemical. A lot of, they're still trying to figure it out that, medication, for example, when they said if you put on a particular medication for anxiety or depression, and that it can, especially in young people, increase the chances of suicide. The reason is because of what you said with the survival mechanism, is that the only thing that's keeping you from committing the act is the fact that you have anxiety about that. But when you take medication, which takes away anxiety, all of a sudden you're not worried about it. And it's not, and becomes, in many cases, it becomes easier. That's why it's so important that doctors monitor that with especially adolescents at the time.
I'll fault the medical community, and I'll sort of throw this back a little bit to the episode we talked with Wes Adams, where he was saying when he was discharged from his fused spine, that they said, hey, don't worry about any side effects. The only thing is you might be a little constipated. And the medical community tends to prescribe and prescribe and prescribe. I mean, you get a little hyper kid. When I was growing up, Johnny's a little bit hyper, just go chill out, kid. Now it's, he's got ADD, ADHD and whatnot. And seem very quick to prescribe that.
Yeah, but in all fairness, I mean, that when you're talking about addiction and suicide, they're kissing cousins. I mean, they're interrelated, but people don't understand yet. I mean, and especially when it comes to depression, suicide, and addiction, unless you've gone through any of those, that I think it's really easy to look outside, looking in, going, why don't you get happy? Why don't you just stop? Why don't you?
It's so
complex.
true.
It's a complex web, and I think the people who are blessed that are not affected by it get impatient with the people who are.
You can't understand mental illness unless you have it, or you've been so close to it that you have to understand.
I've been around it constantly, around people all the time, and it's especially when it goes to suicide and addiction. Oftentimes they're interwoven because addiction is a medicine. Addiction is the one thing that's keeping you away from the thoughts that are going through your head all the time. That's a really difficult thing for people to understand. Yeah,
it is. Like addiction, like doing drugs is like the only way I know how to function. It's like, and a lot of people self-medicate, with weed. I did that for a long time. It's funny because like, I think we were talking about the progression, like where does it start? Like where did my addiction start? It happened really my senior year, when I started using harder drugs. Until then, I had really been self-medicating with weed. And I still was my senior year. But eventually, when you're around drugs a lot and around drug dealers, like, you're going to be exposed to other things and try new things. But really, I mean, I remember when I was still, 14, 15, my parents had put me in therapy for certain reasons. And they just, they wanted me to try to use that before they put me on anything. But I always just wanted that magic pill. And really, for me, the magic pill didn't come in any other form than like weed or another harder substance. Like that was what I considered my magic pill. But I was really considering like going to a psychiatrist and getting put on something, because I was like, I'm just crazy. I need an answer. And it turns out, once it got really bad and I needed to make a decision, was I going to keep using or was I going to get clean? Like the answer came in the form of a 12-step fellowship, which is where I find my quote unquote medicine. I find my magic pill, but it's not a magic pill, it's a fellowship, and it's been able to save my life, and that's the only reason I'm still clean today.
So how did you get to that point? I mean, people always use the term rock bottom
right.
But when you're a teenager and an adolescent, then at that point I don't know if you have that wherewithal to figure out this is my rock bottom. Right. Oftentimes it's the parents intervening on their behalf saying, we're getting you help. You want
to hear something funny?
Oh yeah.
So it was my senior year of high school, and like I said, I was starting to use really heavily, and I was reaching my bottom, and I'll explain that later. But it must have been like around graduation time, and I was starting to go to meetings, and I was starting to get clean, and I must have been like 3 weeks clean, and my parents held an intervention, and I got so angry because I was sitting at this intervention. I was like, guys, I'm doing it already. What are you doing? You're late.
Check this box. Check this box. Check this box.
I'm already doing it, guys. Just let me go to my meeting.
How did you graduate in high school? I mean, were you like in your class ranking? Do you have any idea?
I don't know my class ranking. I knew I was an IB student, and this isn't going to sound good, but like I maintained the grades so no one would find out by like cheating and just doing, cutting corners and things like that. I hate to admit it, but that's just the reality, because I would do anything so the facade wouldn't crack. So I would uphold the grades through cheating, so my parents wouldn't see what was going on, or my teachers wouldn't see what's going on.
All of a sudden, there's a change. Why is she now a C student?
Yeah, exactly. And I never let that happen. I was like protecting my, the image that I was trying to create for myself, that I was okay, so that no one would interrupt my using.
Was cheating real easy to do in school?
No. It was super difficult. God, it was so anxiety-inducing.
There's a whole different angle I'm going to get at.
It sounds like it's more work to cheat than to actually do the work.
It's a lot of work. But like when you're up all night in like parts of DC and Baltimore, like doing drugs, and then you have to go to school the next day to take an exam, like you just do what you got to do.
So how do you get to that point? So again, we're into drinking and weed at this point. Yeah. When does it start to escalate, and how?
Like I was saying, it started my senior year. That's when it really got crazy. It really got insane. So like before then, like I said, I was just smoking weed, drinking, but then I got introduced to certain drug dealers, and like that was where I found my acceptance, was just dating the drug dealers or being best friends with them and just hanging out with them and getting free drugs. And eventually, you know, if your drug dealer's dealing weed, they're gonna start dealing something else because drug dealers love money, and they, you know, the more different drugs they sell, the more cost is associated, or the more like they'll make more sales, right? And so I was hanging out with all these drug dealers, and then they would be introducing me to cocaine at a party, or they'd be giving me like Molly at some like club rave, you know? So I was getting introduced to all these drugs, and they felt so good. So I would just keep being around them so I could keep doing them for free. And, you know, it was, you know, I had a best friend who was a drug dealer at the time, and she really supplied my habit, and we were just together all the time. And my mom couldn't stand who I was when I was using, because I was just volatile and so disrespectful to her. So she asked me to leave her house. And so I left her house, and I moved in with my dad, or so I say, but I really moved in with my drug dealer who lived close by to him, and I stayed with her all the time, and we would just be using every day, and I didn't have any parental supervision.
So obviously your parents are divorced at this point.
Yeah, they are.
So it was easier for
When
you
did they
to
divorce?
kind of...
I was 11. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that might have been a formative.
Yeah, there are just like, little things like that could have had an impact. Yeah. But go ahead. What were you saying?
No, so it was easier for you to kind of... As you were talking before, I'm thinking, you know, how do you slip out? Because my parents were very strict. They were
Right.
young, but they were extremely
Right.
strict. So sneaking out was difficult and all these.
Woohoo,
But
yeah.
if you have divorced parents, it's
Right.
easy to kind of.
You would think so, but no, God, my parents were so strict. They made me see my unmanageability before I did. And when I was 14, I was sneaking out in the middle of the night every night and going to party down the street, you know, and they were putting all these, my mom at one point would not let me out of her sight, ever. Like, if I went to if she went to the grocery store, I had to go. Like, I had to sleep in the room next to hers. Like, I could not.
Wow.
Like, but that was, I would be okay for a while. I would show her that I could do this thing, right? And then, you know, a few months would pass by of me being totally miserable without drugs and being under her complete supervision. And then, you know, the rules would lax, and I would let it go for a little bit. But then, of course, I would pick up, and it would be innocent at first. Oh, Mom, I'm just going out with my friend. Not telling her I'm going out with my friend to smoke weed, but like eventually it's just, I have to have my solution. I have to have it, or I'm going to want to die.
So at 17, what's your drug of choice?
It's Molly and cocaine and weed, like almost every day.
You ever done heroin?
No.
No.
And that's the thing. This is something I bring up when I'm on the Not My Child panel. So my dad, when I was 13, I feel like it was 11 or 13. It was one of those years, you know, he was in the car with us, and this was so random to me, but he was telling me, it just came out of nowhere. He's like, guys, you know, I've had a lot of friends die of heroin and pills, and I don't want you to ever touch hydrocodone or Oxycontin or any other opiate pill. I don't want you trying heroin because you can die. And I was just like, what the hell? You know, like, I don't even use
Kinda
drugs,
random.
Dad. Yeah, I'm like, what? Like, I was so innocent at that point. Like, I really just didn't know where this came from. And it was so out of the blue and weird that when it came down the line, I was 17, I was starting to use these harder drugs, and I had friends who were starting to use heroin. I was so out of my mind at that time on drugs. I was just like, why is heroin so bad? Why do people talk so much shit about it? You know, like, what's so bad about it? I should try it. But then my dad's voice popped in the back of my mind, and he was like, don't do it, you could die. And I was just like, oh shoot, you know, and I never did it.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I know it, and it's so different. I mean, I know the heroin dealers, you know, they're cutting things with the fentanyl and
Right.
the carfentanil now, and that speaks to we need to learn how to make more money as a heroin dealer or as a drug dealer. And I know that's a way to do it. You take heroin that, you know, I don't know what the cost would be, say $20, and you cut it with some fentanyl, which costs $5, and you know, you've got a deadly combination going forward there.
So it seems like you went to find help before your parents intervened.
You wanna hear
Although they were freaked out, obviously.
They were freaked
I'm
out.
like freaked out for them hearing this story.
Thank you.
I'm looking at you and I'm seeing my
Please
daughter.
feel for them. They went through some stuff, guys. Like, please feel for them. They're pretty incredible for supporting me through it. So I credit a fellowship for saving my life, and that whole story.
What's a fellowship?
Fellowship is like, it's a 12-step fellowship is just a group of men and women who help each other get clean or sober. So that could be Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous.
Gotcha. So it's just a regular,
it's
just a program of any kind.
It's a program. Yeah, one of those programs. And so I got introduced to a program when I was 15. So that
Who
was
introduced you to it?
my boss at a clothing store I worked at. And she was a recovering alcoholic at the time.
And she saw all the signs.
She was so sweet, and I just was so gravitated
But I mean,
towards her.
she looked at you and she knew right away.
Well, no. So I was like I was saying, she was so sweet, and I just, you know, I needed somebody to be nice to me because I hated myself so much, and I didn't really have a lot of friends, and so I like really loved that this woman was so nice to me, And so I would tell her things. She would share her story with me that she got high in high school. She was like tripping out in school and all this stuff. And we really bonded. And I didn't know it at the time, but she was trying to help me. As she was a recovering alcoholic. And one day I had told her like, oh, I just gotten high before work and I was drinking the night before. And she was like, girl, do you want to come to a meeting with me? And I was just like, why the heck not? And I was just like, okay.
Well, they have drugs there?
So
wasn't my thought, though, at the
it was
time.
just sort of surreptitious that you ended up going there.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was a miracle.
I'm free tonight.
It was honestly like, now I'm a more spiritual person, but like I can see it now that was a miracle that happened. Not everybody gets that. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't even know that there was a fellowship.
Do you know what you expected when you went to that first meeting?
Not at all. I would just kind of, my parents, like I said, they kind of let me know that I was unmanageable, that I had a problem. I always thought I had a drug problem. It was never a drug addiction, but it was always I had a problem with drugs. Okay. Right? So I was open-minded to going. Maybe I could chill out for a little bit for my parents, and I ended up going, and it was the first time I ever felt normal. When I went there, I felt like I was home. Because
everyone had the same feelings. Yes. They understood something. Like,
yes, and they were so
parents,
open.
For as well-meaning as they were, didn't understand.
They didn't understand, and no.
I know it's tough. I know it's hard. You don't.
You don't, and no one. I felt like no one ever understood me my whole life because I always felt crazy, and it was so isolating. And when I was there, people opened up about their feelings, and they were the same feelings that I was having. And I had never experienced that. People being open with their feelings. I don't think we recognize it, but not a lot of people are open with their emotions.
No, that's true. And it's very empowering when you're into a situation where you think you're alone and you're not. You mentioned that it was a miracle and spiritualism and stuff like that. Were you raised?
She was born.
Religious?
You were.
Yeah.
You guys are funny.
Yeah, I was born. I was born, and I don't
I was born once that happened. No, so I totally know where you're coming from.
But I mean, were you raised in a religious family? I mean, were you on church? So it was not.
No, I've never went to church. Like hardly a day. I might have gone to church like once.
Okay.
But it was funny because this is probably the best part of my childhood. We go to Chicken Roost on Saturday mornings as a family. That was as religious as we got.
That's because Chick-fil-A is not open.
Yeah, exactly. Like otherwise we would have been there. So that was about all the spirituality I got. But my grandmother was religious, and I heard people say God bless you, and like I just never really got it, and I never really had a taste for spirituality until I was starting to hit rock bottom. And
the follow-up question that I've got for that then is, are you religious, spiritual now at this point? Do you go to church now?
I actually do go to church now. It's more of a social thing. It's to go with people I meet through the fellowship and to feel close to them and to feel close to God at the same time. I'm not a devout follower of any religion.
So you don't have a Bible in your car and you're not thumping it on the way?
No, not at all. And I know there are people who do, and that might be their saving grace, but for me, it's always been the fellowship. That has been where I have found my God and where I've found my saving grace.
And the church, is it a church?
It's a community church. And it's run by a recovering heroin addict.
Kind of a non-denominational sort of situation.
But I love going to that specific church because it feels like I'm in a meeting, because it's the pastor is a recovering heroin addict.
When you say a community church, is it a physical location or is it changed
It's around? A physical location.
So they own a building and it's used specifically as a church.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back. So we're now 17 seems to be ground zero.
Pivotal, yes, right. So pivotal.
So at this point, you're drinking, you're high
all the time,
while maintaining grades, while working.
Yes, I was working too. I was actually like a hostess at an Italian restaurant too, so I was making money to support my habit.
Okay, let's guess. Is it 17?
Well,
that's 3 years.
Here's my problem with hostesses.
At Italian
you go with the hostesses and go, I'd like 2, and they just crowd around that map, and they're like, I'm like, I see like 20 open spaces right there.
You know why nobody knows how to seat? Because they're all high. No, I'm sorry.
I knew it. That's what I told my wife. I said, they're all high. She goes,
You're probably right.
So 17. So at this point, your parents are freaked. They know something's going on. They don't know how to handle it. They don't, which in their defense,
how
parents
do you though? Yeah.
Do they get along?
Well, at the time they had to get along to try to save me, right? They had to work together.
Oh, sorry. So you were kind of a unifying factor in this whole thing.
A little bit, but I was also, my parents had a really hard time figuring out what to do with me. My mom wanted to kind of control what was happening. She wanted to save me, right? But my dad was like, no, we need to let her out on her own. She needs to hit rock bottom.
I'm putting myself in their shoes right now.
Yeah,
and I don't know what I would do.
You know what my mom
and you're
told
freaking me out because seriously, I see my daughter sitting here.
It's crazy. So, this is something really horrible that my mom has shared with me since I've gotten clean, but she was saying that in order to live her life, she had to accept that I was going to die.
You know what? I had a couple friends who were drinking heavily.
Can you repeat that one more time?
So I was saying that in order to live her life, she had to accept that I was going to die.
Damn.
Yeah. She did, because I was really at that point where I was losing weight rapidly. I looked like a ghost. I was deteriorating physically. I was trying to hide it with makeup, but she could tell. I was her daughter. She had seen me grow up to be a vibrant woman and slowly just deteriorate. And she started going to Al-Anon because she had a hard time accepting it. And that's where she learned that she really had to accept that this could be what happened, but she needed to live her life or she was going to go crazy, because so many parents enable their children because they want to save them, and they make their drug addicted child their whole life and their whole mission. And she had to live her life. She had to find her happiness where she could. And I don't blame her for that, because I still find her pivotal in my recovery. Like, even though she says that, she loved me so hard. It was just that love from a distance and that tough love. I really credit her for saving my life, being part of the reason I'm still alive today, because while she kicked me out of her house, basically, she always let me come back if I needed to come back. She wouldn't let me stay, but if I needed to come home just to hug her, if she knew I needed to be loved still. So I would come over in the middle of the night sometimes, and she could see how horrible I looked and how depressed I was, and she would just hug me and tell me she loved me. And because I hated myself and I didn't have people in my life who truly cared about me, she was the only person I received any love from. And that made me feel like I was still worth something and that I still deserved to live, because somebody loved me, and it was my mom, and like, honestly, it makes me emotional right now because
I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, I know, because I
got something in my eye.
I really, like, it makes me tear up because, like, I don't think any human power can save an addict, but I truly believe love is the answer. Loving people through their addiction, even though it's so difficult because we're literally the worst people on earth when we're using. I really credit her love for helping me find my worth and helping me get clean.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I know, guys. What? Next question.
All right,
so what Italian restaurant did
Right. I'm trying not to say anything.
Well, so let's jump back and say, so you have a boss at the clothing store who gets you to go to a fellowship meeting.
Right.
So you're at the meeting and you're probably not sold on it, but you're interested.
I'm very interested. I'm very
You want to
happy
kick the tires a little more on this
one.
Yeah,
I did. And it's funny because I was
So you went home, got high, and thought about it? Right?
No, really, it was very similar to that. But
I wasn't kidding.
Yeah, you weren't kidding. It's really true. But so I really liked it there. I was thinking about that the other day. I really liked it there. But I wasn't done using it. I still was so miserable that I needed to use, and I was so young. I was 15. Nobody there was 15, Some people in their 20s, a lot of older people, but I just didn't feel necessarily a part of that yet. I was still too scared to become a part of the fellowship and meet new people. Like, it was easier to use still. But it's funny.
Comfortable, and you knew what it was.
I knew what it was. I had, friends my age who I could bond with over smoking pot. But it's funny because, like I said, when I reached that point of degradation that I was explaining to you, and even though that woman, I think she's not sober today, I remember where that meeting was. I remember the day, the time, the location. I remembered all of it. I remember who was there. And I showed up there when I was 17, 2 years later, without her. I just showed up there because I was like, that's where I think I'm going to get my help. And I did.
Oh, that was 2 years after.
Yeah, 2 years later, I came back to that same meeting, and there were still some of the same people there.
So the woman who brought you there she's.
I don't think she is.
You're always. We were talking about this before we started recording. That you're just always a hair away from it. You're never free from it.
Yep. Yeah, and she was. It's hard. It's hard to stay sober or clean or whatever you're doing. Like, there are. Life's hard, and people use to feel better. If you go through a death or you go through a breakup, like, all you want to do is drink with your friends, go out and have fun, and that's so associated with drinking and using drugs in our culture. And it's just easier for a lot of people. It's harder to go to a meeting and write in a journal and meditate and do everything that's truly good for you. It's easier to just throw back a drink. But, like, I know where that gets me today. I know that gets me to that place where my mom thinks I'm going to die again. And I don't want that. I want to live. I want to enjoy my life. It's so sad because we've recently lost a few people in the community. I've lost people I've cared about, And I feel so sad because they didn't get to experience what I've got to experience being clean today.
So you still go to the meetings on a regular basis?
That's maintenance. It's maintenance. If I do not go to meetings, I will end up using again. I will. It's the only thing that has ever worked for me.
So did you, and there's a lot of debate as to what causes addiction, in so much as, is it chemical? Do people have a predisposition to it? Is it emotional? Is it all of it, a mix of it? Because I know I've been around it quite a bit, so I can identify the people almost instinctively who are like, the people.
We have the telltale signs.
Right. I always wonder, what kind of makes them tick? What kind of draws them? Why are they drawn to what they do? And I've seen people slip after 20, 25 years.
It happens.
And it's very easy to do that. But in the meantime, is it just because you have different time? Your mind races and you're kind of in your own head all the time.
Right.
And you look at people who aren't addicts and they don't have this problem. Think, are you not in your head all the time? Are you not thinking about these things?
Everyone's in their head all the time. Like, I really do. It's so easy to get wrapped up. Not everyone. A lot of people do have peace of mind and are spiritual people and have good heads on their shoulders. But for a lot, I found, the problems that I have, a lot of people who don't have the same problems as I do. The feelings of not being good enough, of not fitting in. Like, a lot of people feel that way, but they just don't feel the need to use drinking and drugs excessively like I did. And I'm grateful today that it got so bad, because otherwise I think I'd still be out there, binge drinking in college. Like you said, like I'm a student at the University of Maryland. The whole time I've been there, I have not drank or used drugs, which is crazy. I know people hear that and be like, really? Never? Not once? Like, no,
I hear
not
there's an award for that or something.
Yeah, right? Like, can I get a plaque? Like, is there a plaque on campus I can get?
Do you go to parties and everything, though? Or do you kind of take yourself out of that? People, places, and opportunities.
Yeah, people, places, and things, like, can't associate with it. Like, really, sometimes wish I could. That sounds fun. I want to be normal. I want to be a normal college student, but at the same time, I know I can't be. I've done enough work on myself to realize I can never be that person. I just have to accept who I am.
Do you like yourself?
I love myself. And that's taken a long time. It's taken, almost 3 years of being in recovery to even be able to say that just automatically. It really has. It's taken a lot of work.
That did roll off your tongue.
Yeah, it does. It's powerful today to be able to love myself.
I mean, one question I had is, you said that at one point you were living with your dealer.
Yep.
Pretending to live with your dad, but living with your dealer. Yep. Who was also a friend.
Yep.
Are you still friendly with her?
It's funny because she still contacts me after 3 years of, I first got clean June of 2014. So it's been 3 years since I was really actively using. And she will still hit me up today over text or Facebook or Instagram. To buy or? No, just to hang out. Because it's hard to understand, but like, misery loves company. Like, we were running buddies. That's what, they call people, couples who use together. You'll see in, Baltimore City, like, people who are together all the time to use, because it's so miserable using alone. Yeah. It makes you feel more normal if you have somebody, and at least somebody cares about you, right? But in the end, like, we had a falling out because she really, we're using addicts. Like, we don't care about anybody but ourselves. So, like, there were some selfish things going on that really hurt my feelings. I'm so grateful that we had a falling out, because if we did not, I think I would still be in that situation. So was that a breakup? I mean, I don't know how many relationships you had with with significant others or whatnot. Right. But I mean, would you liken that to a romantic breakup? It was like, we were so close, right? So I wouldn't say romantic, but definitely like, just, we were so close, and it was devastating to lose her. But at the same time, there are so many factors that went into me getting clean, and that was one of them. Breaking it off with her, breaking up with the boyfriend who was kind of dealing and using, and just having all those different factors, being emotionally dead, and just, there were so many things that went into it. I really can't even describe the scenarios that happened to get me clean, because I truly think it was God. Like, I cannot explain God, right? So I can't even explain what the power was that helped me get to where I am today, because it wasn't me. My will got me high, like, it was someone else's or something else's will to get me clean. So we get back to the recovery, right? So yours seems a little more gradual than I know that no recovery is the same. Right. The ones I'm the most familiar with, is especially when you get to middle age, are a definite crash and burn, because you have more to lose at that point. Yep.
You have the house, you have the wife, you have the kids, you have the car, you have all those things.
Right.
When you're a teenager, it's a little more, you have a little more cushion.
Yeah,
not
definitely.
that it makes it any easier, of course.
No, but
Matter of fact,
definitely.
maybe it makes it a little more complicated because you don't have that definitive moment saying,
Right.
oh, this is it.
It had to be the spiritual death for me. It was not going to be anything else.
So explain that.
The spiritual death. So it's, I wish I was more well versed in like recovery phrases, but I never really, I don't memorize the phrases in the literature in my fellowship, but I know what it feels like to me. And the spiritual.
Is that one of like the concepts of a fellowship?
Yeah, you have to read literature and you have to,
No, I mean the spiritual death part.
Oh yeah, well it's part of a lot of it's part of really every addict story who seeks recovery, like getting so desperate enough to seek recovery because you have died that spiritual death, just like degrading yourself constantly until you're subhuman. Just like living with animalistic behaviors. It's just there was no soul left in me. I was just giving my soul away to people just for another drug or another drink.
It's just like a constant craving of something else to
and
fill it.
And I would degrade myself to get whatever I wanted, and I felt like selling my soul every time I did something I didn't want to do to get drugs. Like I was selling my soul basically, and I had no soul left.
So spiritually bankrupt.
Yeah, spiritually bankrupt, a spiritual death. Yeah.
Huh. And so that point where it's just nagging at you because that's the hatred and the self-loathing that comes into it.
And it only grows stronger and stronger the more you kill off your soul.
So you go to the fellowship. So you get a sample of it at 15. And,
right.
And in teenage years, 2 years is like probably 5 years
Oh
each.
my God,
So
it's crazy. I was just talking to somebody the other day about, we both are in the program and he knows an ex-boyfriend of mine. He brought it up and he was like, yeah, it was 2012, right? That's 5 years ago. I'm like, 5 years ago? What?
High school to me.
Yeah, and he was like, that's just 5 years ago. I'm like, no, that's a lifetime ago.
High school to me seemed like it went on, like college was that.
Yeah.
High school to me seemed like it went on for 15 years.
It went on forever.
And it was
so much crazy stuff.
Forever. I mean, just in general, I think everyone would be like that. High school.
Yeah.
No one has ever said high school went so fast.
Would you still be if you had not had your epiphany?
Right.
You'd still be using today.
Definitely.
Would you have graduated onto to heroin and to other things, or do you think you had sort of plateaued with?
That's so terrifying to think about. But yet, honestly, like everything, like I said, it wasn't me. It wasn't me to get myself clean because everything happened so perfectly at the time it needed to get me clean. But I think like if, I don't know, God had just different ideas, eventually what my dad said maybe might have mattered a few years down the road if I was feeling so miserable still. Like I might have wanted to use heroin, but I don't. I live in the might have or maybe would happen just to keep a healthy fear of addiction.
You ever miss it?
I mean, only when I'm feeling really bad, and that's because I'm not taking care of myself spiritually. Like I'm not going to meetings and I'm not doing the work I need to be doing. I'm not praying or meditating. I'm not doing the spiritual work I need to be doing. So I just feel bad. And I'm like, well, you know what? I shouldn't go to a meeting. Maybe I should go to that college party. That would be fun. That would solve all my problems. It's so easy to get in that mindset. So I have to keep going daily to meetings and I have to daily do my work on myself. It has to be a continuous thing. There's no graduating from recovery. Mm-hmm. There's no graduating. I will be doing this for the rest of my life, and I want to be doing this for the rest of my life because I know that if I don't, like I was saying, I keep a healthy fear because if I don't do this, I could eventually become a heroin user. I think about it, I think if I went out tomorrow, I wouldn't die right away. There are some people that will go out tomorrow and they will die because they will go back to heroin or they'll go back to a drug that can instantly kill them. With all the fentanyl that's been going around the state. But for me, it wouldn't happen right away. It might take some time, and that's the scary part. I would think nothing was wrong for a while. But eventually my addiction is progressive. I will use harder substances, and I could use harder substances like heroin eventually. Like I keep that healthy fear in the back of my mind because it's so easy to, like I said, think, hey, I can go to a college party and drink, no big deal. But then I've read the literature in my program. I've done the work on myself to realize that it's progressive. Like if I pick up a drink tomorrow, and I'll tell you how this is progressive. So I went to University of South Carolina, September of 2014. I went off to college. People told me not to do it. They were like, don't go, you could relapse. And I was like, no, I got this. It's gonna be super fun. And I got there and I was so lonely. I didn't know anybody and I wasn't expecting that. I was so lonely. I didn't go to the meetings down there. And, I just wanted friends and I wanted to feel a part of. So I met a few girls and, all the girls drank down there. It was so crazy. Like that's how they made friends. Like, you all drank together. And so we went to a few parties, and I started by just sipping a beer. I just sipped a beer. I was like, this is cool. Like, I'm sober. I'm clean. Like, I can do this. And it progressed to like sipping beer to like having one beer. I was like, all right, it's still cool. Like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And so that's, you know, continued for maybe a few weeks. And then eventually I was at a party and somebody had a bag of wine and they were like, drink this bag of wine. Yeah, bag of wine, slap in the bag. No, that's what happened. I was so classy, right? So they were like, so I got drunk off slap in the bag. Like, that's that's so stupid, right? But that like showed me the progression of the disease. Like, it starts with sipping beer to getting drunk off a bag of wine. Like, it's that fast. That was like in a matter of a few weeks that happened. And that, I'm grateful for that relapse. I do not want to relapse again, but I'm grateful because it showed me the progression of the disease. And now I cannot lie to myself and tell myself that I can just have one beer, because I can't.
And very few people get sober and don't relapse at one point,
right?
From what I understand. I think
it's pretty rare. I think because, you know, you don't have that tape to play in the back of your head. That's why I say that.
You think you're like, I have it under control.
Exactly, because you haven't seen that you can get it out of control. You know.
Matter of fact, I gotta be honest with you. Most of the people I know who've gotten sober from drinking, I would get, now that I think about it, most of them have said at one point early on in the recovery, going, you know, this is just to get control. I don't have a problem.
Right.
But I can drink it someday.
Right.
Again. They, in the back of their mind, they think that because they don't want to divorce themselves from that.
Right.
They don't want to give it up because it's a friend. It's always been there with you. I'm not a good friend, but it's always there with you.
Right.
You know,
and it's always the easy. It's always the easy way out, right? It's just an easy way to feel better. But it honestly, I've come to find out it's not, because it comes with so much other things that are more difficult than being clean. Like, it comes with the depression and the anxiety again. I think it was so funny that we talked about, you know, depression and anxiety earlier, because
I don't think it's funny.
Well, it's not funny. It's funny when I talk about it.
No, that's funny there.
It's funny when I talk about it. I have my own jokes, guys. So, like,
you guys are not allowed to.
You guys think things are messed up. I think they're funny today. So I say it's funny because my depression and anxiety, I always wanted to be put on a pill for it. I was like, I'm just depressed. I'm just anxious. That's what I got. As soon as I got clean and really started working on myself in the fellowship, all of it disappeared. All my anxiety, it left. All my depression, no more. I was happy and I was carefree and I had peace of mind. And that's because I've found my answer in the fellowship. I'm not a dual diagnosis. A lot of people, it means that you have a mental illness on top of addiction. So there are still people that need to take medication when they get clean. That is a
treatment for a mental illness.
Yes, it is. That's it. And I didn't have didn't have another mental illness. I had the disease of addiction. So I've always had that mental illness that makes me depressed and anxious, but as soon as I treat it, it just goes away.
So it's a circular thing. You weren't self-medicating so much that you were making it worse. You were drinking because you were depressed and suicidal, and then you were depressed and suicidal because you were drinking. So it was just one of those. It was a horrible, circles.
Endless cycle, and it made me realize that addiction has always been with me, and I kind of knew that from the beginning. I always cheated, lied, stole from like 3 years old on. So it has always been with me. I've always been an untreated addict my whole life, and that's why I've been so miserable for so long.
So what now? Do you refocus that energy, refocus the compulsions? I've seen a lot of people, they get into working out, they get into running. I read a great article by someone who was a recovering alcoholic, how they considered themselves a recovering alcoholic,
right.
But they said that other recovering alcoholics did not, because he didn't seek a 12-step program, he didn't seek treatment.
That's true.
What he did was that he focused all that into running. And he said, I run, 10 miles, 15 miles a day, and the people say that I am not in full recovery because I am not dealing with the compulsions. I've just shifted that from drinking into running. And even though it's something that's healthy for my body, it's not addressing the core reasons why I'm drinking.
It doesn't address the core reasons.
I can't speak to that, but it's an interesting...
That's a really interesting article, because I see that so much in my own fellowship. People will go to the gym and become gym rats and start like building bodybuilder muscles because that makes them feel good, so they don't have to look at themselves. And that's a common problem in the fellowship, just to see people come and not address their issues. So in a 12-step fellowship, you do a thing called step work, and that's the 12 steps. That's why they're called 12-step fellowships, because there's the 12 steps and you work them through journaling or, a guidebook, and you'll go through them and you'll address the core issues of your addiction. Whereas when you run, you're not working on really deep emotional issues. You might not be focusing on your childhood trauma when you're running. You're not addressing your childhood trauma or like sexual trauma. You're not talking about any of that. You're just running, right? You're just working out. It might make you feel good, But it's really, I like that you said it's not addressing the core issues. And that's why I've found that I've been able to recover for the amount of time I have already, is because I've always wanted to address my core issues. I've always wanted to get to know myself, because I found so many answers to questions I've had my whole life about myself through going through this 12 steps. Yeah.
So what's your relationship with your parents now?
Oh my God, this is like beautiful. Like, it makes me cry when I think about it, because like I said, I didn't grow up with the best relationship with my father, and that always broke my heart. I always just wanted him to love me, right? And my mom, you know, I kind of blamed her growing up because I felt like she didn't protect me from him, and she just, you know, she just had her own issues she was going through. But, you know, I credit her for saving my life. And my dad, it's been a slower story, but it's been like the most beautiful part of this journey. And that's why I say I'm really sad when people pass away before they get this thing, because I've seen the gifts of this. And it's just been this year that I've gotten really close to my father, and like it makes me want to cry because we've never had that relationship.
You're gonna work us up this whole
and podcast. I know I really
Yeah.
it's an emotional story, you know. This is my life, and it's serious, because I wanted to use over that. I hated my dad growing up. I hated him so much. I resented him for how he made me feel. He made me an addict, you know, but I came to find out in the program I was always an addict. It was not his fault, you know, and I was able to forgive him, and slowly we built a relationship. So he went on this trip to Italy when I was, I think, a year clean. He didn't invite me. He invited my siblings. I didn't get to go because he didn't trust me. He just, you know, he thought I was still crazy, and I was so hurt by that. And, but this year, you know, he's seen my growth, and I'll go to his office occasionally, and I'll just sit there and talk to him, and I'll just like hang out with him, and we'll talk about our lives. And I found we have so much in common. And when I had a friend pass away recently, and I went to his office afterwards, I wanted to tell him, I'm like, I'm so sorry. If I ever made you fear for my life, I would never do that to you, you know. And he's like, I love you, you know. I've never heard him really say that to me before in that way, you know, just that so full of gratitude and just a real true love. And that's why I say, like, love is always the answer, because I felt like when we had that bonding moment, it healed my heart a little bit. You know, I just always wanted him to love me, and like it might come through heartache, and a lot of growing pains, but like we're finally there, you know. And it's just, I'm still coming to accept that this is a new relationship I have in my life that I've always wanted, and we're like getting to know each other as like friends, and it's really cool. It's not as the, you know, necessarily the typical father-daughter relationship, but it's better than anything I had before, and I'm grateful for that.
We were saying before that you don't understand the mind of an addict or the life of an addict, or what, and there's a lot of truth to that. Right. I think the flip side of that, it's not till you have kids and the complexity of having kids that you understand just the fear that you have, and the fear that, you know, when John, you know, your daughters are off in college, and your son's off in college, and just that something's going to happen to them, or that they're going to, even though they had a great upbringing, what's going to happen when they're there? What kind of judgments are they going to make? And just the fact that you said your mother just had come to not even a realization, but started to accept the fact that you might die. I mean, that just really kind of chills any parent's heart to think of something like that. Right.
I think that your story is just, I mean, I'm sitting here in awe that, you know, it, as an unloved child, if you will. I mean, it's, you know, into, you know, thoughts of suicide, to drinking, to, you know, and now clean and sober for 3 years, 3 or 4 years? 4 years.
Yeah, I've been clean 3 years in September.
Okay. Surviving college without a drink.
University of Maryland, at least. Can't say so about South Carolina. Sorry, guys.
Okay, well,
sorry, Gamecocks.
I mean, you're going.
Now what happens in South Carolina?
You're going to be
in South Carolina.
You're going to be a senior.
Yeah, I am.
You've got the support of your family. You've got a love of your father that you have never experienced in your life at this point, which is pretty powerful.
It is.
You know, and your future. I mean, you know, once you're out here, you're heading out west or something.
Yeah, something
you know,
like
someplace
that.
To start a thing. And you had mentioned very earlier, briefly, you just sort of dusted by it, and you mentioned the Not My Child.
Yeah.
Are you working with the county on that program? Tell us a little bit about your involvement with Not My Child, which is a wonderful video that we encourage everybody to look at, watch, and realize that. And what's your involvement with that?
So part of the reason I think I'm still clean is because I'm of service. You know, I give back to my community, and if I gave back, I would find I really find my self-worth in that. I find the most happiness I've felt in that. And so on Not My Child, I'm on a panel of different speakers, and I'm the only recovering addict on that panel. So I think I can bring a lot to the conversation, because when you just talk about addiction and you're not an addict, how can you ever truly understand? So I try to make, I talk to students. We go into high schools. I talk to community members. We go to churches, different community organizations ask us to speak. And I'll go onto this panel and I'll just share my experience, and they'll ask me questions. How did it get to where, how did it get so bad? Or, the parents want to know, how can I save my children? My child's an addict. And, I'm just a person. I don't have all the answers, but I can share my experience. And I think that can be pretty powerful. I'll tell them what happened and what it's like now, and how I got here.
Well, I think your experience is certainly the most relevant, the most compelling.
Yeah.
I know. Have you been on the panel with Lisa Hillman? I guess.
I don't. Think so.
I know she wrote a book.
That's a really good book.
About her son that is sort of this hidden. I can't remember the name of the title of it, but it was just local woman. It's just finally, we don't keep this secret. Our son's an addict, and now it was out.
Exactly.
And he's the kid has turned around, and as you are giving back to the community, he's down in Florida running halfway houses.
That's awesome. That's a kind of a dream for me, to give back in that way. Like, I would love to open a recovery house.
Well, you look at Angel Traynor.
I love
she was
her.
great.
God, she's amazing.
And if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen, because it was really good.
I haven't listened to it. I'm not going to do that. It's great that all this is being brought up, because I was almost, anytime someone asks me to share my experience in a public way, I get a little nervous, because it reminds me of the shame and the guilt that I used to feel for being as an addict. Like, I used to not want anybody to know my dirty secret, right? And I always feel just a little bit of anxiety when somebody asks me, but I know I have to share my experience, because
I think any kind of shame that you might have might be certainly eclipsed by the amount of pride you should have.
Yeah. I just realized I can't have pride. I have to be humble about my experience. I have to share it no matter what, because it could save someone's life. And that's what is always in the back of my mind. Even though I have that anxiety or I feel that shame, like, I don't truly think it's shame today. Like, I'm glad that I'm at the point that I am now. And if I've got it, I've got to give it back, right? If I want to keep this, I have to give it back.
Yeah. And you certainly have. Well, wow. Jen, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
A little emotional, but that's
I'll dry the eyes off a little bit. Okay, yeah, I got that, and a bug finally got out of my eye. Wow. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come down here to our room. The room with my kids' crap in
The room.
Best of luck to you, and I want to hear the great stories after you graduate. You walk across the stage at University of Maryland. You rub that turtle's nose or whatever they do over there.
I'll keep it posted.
The best of luck to you. Congratulations on any number of fronts. That's for sure. With both in beating the addiction, the relationships that you've reestablished, and breaking up with your dealer.
3 years straight so far.
That's right. Absolutely. Well done. Well done.
Well, thanks for coming in, Jen. We appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been great, guys.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.